So here we are, episode 15, as we've just worked out. Yeah, how you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, busy week, but enjoyable week. Lots of coach conversations now that they're all back and moving around. A little bit on the take here, so it seems to be moving fast. The West Ham girls are off at Old Trafford to play a game this weekend, and what else is going on? Yeah, closer to the wedding. That's not sport related, but it just adds an extra bit of evening browsing and focus. How was your week? What did you get up to?
All right, fairly good week. Lots on. Appointed a new person to our team, so that's cool. Yep, so that's good. She starts in June, start of June. Coaches meeting with all the coaches at the club, where I landed the club philosophy.
Oh, very good.
Much talked about club philosophy. So I dropped into their inbox during the week 2,000 words of my ideal environment. So we then pulled that apart, and it was an interesting conversation with some different people. Plus, I had kind of like a one-to-one with one of the other coaches one of the nights to talk about his age group, and like he's just. I did some player profiles of some positions and some things we'd look for in different positions. And he's just taken them and gone, right, I'm going to adapt these for my under-15s next year, turn that straight into their IDPs. I'm like, awesome. And he sent me some stuff back through, and he said, right, can we talk about this linked to formations? And it's like, brilliant. So we had an hour on that on Tuesday, Wednesday. And then we had another coaches meeting with all the coaches for the philosophy. So yeah, it was all right, but movement.
That's really cool. I noticed when you were talking there was a lot of wheeze in there. That's that is a key message right off the bat to get in. But before I ask you about the environment part, like we during the week we're talking about recruitment in a couple of the sessions that we're on and coach conversations. And what was interesting is the shift from when I used to play and coach and how you'd recruit people in and what you would look for to now. And I don't know if that's of it. Well, I do know it's more of an education on my part, and the people who were around me, because the times have changed and we have access to more things and blah, blah, blah. But even the profiling side of things, like you're recruiting, what we said from a basketball perspective during the week was you're recruiting a basketball player, not a position. And that is a change in mindset or shift of like, we know that, this type of player, maybe if you're 6'5", you might play in the post area, or if you're this play, you might play out here. And actually how restrictive that was, because you could have a tall player who has good ball handling. Yes, there's a growth spurt and there's coordination, but you might also have a guard that's really powerful, and they could be in a different position, but they could get after boards like the Dennis Rodman, or, he still had his height, but just an interesting thing. And from what you've said there is a dropped stone in the ocean, if you like, or a pebble. And all of a sudden, all these brilliant conversations happened. So I feel sometimes when we have conversations with people, they want the answer. They want the silver bullet, the top tips. And although they're really great, they're only a starting point in conversation, aren't they? From what you've even had this week.
Absolutely. The reality is going to be what happens on the grass, on the pitch, around kind of practice and match day, with the types of practices we use, the environment that we create, the behaviours that the coaches show, the way we interact with the kids, the way we engage with them. So there was a few things I kind of snuck in that things that created an interesting discussion about. Well, we asked the kids what they think.
Oh, right.
So we had a really good discussion as a group of coaches on Thursday of, because I put in there, we will not sacrifice our principles of development over winning, even in a cup final.
Wow.
And one of the coaches made a really good point. Well, so there was some different view. Well, one guy had a bit of a different view. And then one of the other coaches, one of the under-14s coaches, talked about, he said, well, if you've used a development philosophy to get you to the cup final, why would you then change it because it's a cup final? And I was like, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
But when it gets to difficult moments, and I said, well, ask the kids, the players, how they want to pick the team for difficult games. You know, what's the principles or values that we go with?
Yeah.
But the important part for me is not the outcome that they get to, but it's more the fact that they're engaging the young people in those discussions in the first place.
That's absolutely brilliant. And I think to set that down early, because it is probably the maybe the societal pressure that comes on coaches and through organizations and society around what success looks like, that gets to that point at the cup final. You know, maybe it's different for individual people, but in general, it's the expectation to win. You go there to do this and you take shortcuts and you move people in. So to set that seed early and go, well, what might it look like if we get to that point? Well, actually, let's look at the journey that we have to take to get there. It brought me back to a moment where, and I remember it like it was yesterday, in the school hall that we used to train, there was a home and away dressing room. We always gave the smaller dressing room to the away team. Oh, it's awful, isn't it? Well, I think there was probably times when we were nicer and didn't, but at the moment in this story, we're in the smaller dressing room. And the concern was, which also makes me think, I was 17 years old playing with a really successful club and we weren't winning. So successful club is in the senior team and all that success as we were playing up was brilliant. But under 19, as I was playing at the time, we weren't. And the coach had actually created such an open environment that we felt, and I didn't even obviously think of this at the time, we felt it was okay to go and question. So we asked why we weren't winning. We asked where we were winning, you know, some of the easier games, obviously, and some of the tougher games not. And he said, you know, you're young in an older league. So he always entered us into, sometimes I think he even got in for trouble because we had younger, really young players and there was all these new rules that were brought in. But anyway, we were 16, 17 as a group playing under 19. And we wanted to win because that's all, you know, that's the competitive side of us. We weren't interested as athletes developing. We wanted to win all our games. And he said, the time will come. We're developing for when you play under 19, when you are of age to play, which is coming around the corner. And he was right. You know, soon after that, we had a string of wins, I think it was 3 finals and 2 championships, that particular group of us. And then everyone went off in their own direction. But yeah, it's really interesting to look at it as the vet and hold. And I don't think anyone around that time around him support wise was acknowledging, you know, so that was it was really interesting.
Yeah, that kind of ties into some of the conversations that we were having about, you know, I was talking about you know, nothing that you do as a coach within that kind of structure exists in isolation. So, you know, you might do a practice, but that's part of a season of work that's part of their football career forever. Yeah. So, you know, we can't get hung up on, you know, we lose 3-0 at the weekend and every goal was from a corner. So that week in training, we just do defending corners. You know, that's largely irrelevant, and how we can kind of, you know, see that long-term focus about what we're trying to achieve. But it prompted some really interesting conversations. Yeah, some really interesting conversations.
Which is the gold part, isn't it? Because if everybody's thinking about something and they're all bringing it back, then you're in a place of rich conversations going off and the development is happening because people are getting curious about it. And
yeah.
Anyway,
my favourite message actually was from a lady called Jane, who she doesn't coach, but she kind of helps out with, well, she does a lot more than help out. She kind of leads a lot of the running of the club, really. It's the chairman's wife, and she's brilliant. And she sent me a message afterwards saying, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm excited about football.
Oh, bloody hell.
Like, well done. Like, did you not expect that? Did you not feel like? She was like, no, it was taking me really by surprise. So I love the fact that because she's part of the conversation, you know, and she said, right, this is what I think, you know, I'm excited. Like, I'm like, that brilliant. This is great.
Yeah,
so
that is
someone that wasn't excited.
Yeah, well done. Well done. That's absolutely brilliant. And it does link nicely. Sorry, I know now I'm holding on this point, but it does also link nicely to what you said last week when we were talking about Steve Kerr. And, you know, it's not a case of in that one game where they were, you know, down 2 points and there was a minute left in the clock that he decided you lead that time out. That's a training thing that's passed through the age groups. That's given an opportunity for people to normalize that kind of behavior and input. And yeah, so I like that continue. Cool. Speaking of games and preparation and planning, what are your thoughts around, and it is a bit of research that we've done in UK coaching and prior as I've done over the years in the performance analyst role around communication to players prior to games, in the timeline of a game. Like, what's your experience around that? I know you can take it any direction you want, but I'm kind of interested in the prep stage and what happens during the game in the communication side of things.
So I think it's a great topic, and I think it's an interesting one to explore trying different things with. I think it's a real opportunity for coaches to be creative with. The easy go-to part of me as a younger coach was I tell the players what's happening during the game. We go out, I lead the warm-up, half-time, I tell the players what I've seen, end of game, I ask them what happened in the game, but that doesn't really tell you much. That probably would have been the younger, more novice coach in me that kind of went down that route. But that, I think, has probably shifted and evolved over the years to, I think, probably a mixed methods approach. So I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm just saying that I think I've probably evolved to use that and a load of other stuff. So if we kind of broke it down on that timeline, so we think about the before the game bit, I think it depends on what the environment that you're trying to create is, and the game, the moment, because different things, different moments affect people in different ways. So I'll give you an example of that. Under 10s at Fulham, we're playing away at Chelsea. The kids aren't under pressure from us as coaches, but they feel the pressure from parents because we're going to Chelsea and they've got a super duper amazing training ground at Cobham, and it's a very, it's a local derby. So they feel the pressure. And one of the best team talks that we did, which was, it was coach led in the sense of we directed where it went, but we engaged them in a different way. We never talked about football once. So we're away at Chelsea with a group of 9 and 10-year-olds that are largely a bit nervous. A few that are kind of sleeves rolled up, but mostly nervous. And all we talked about was the fact that it was the London Marathon that day. All right. And we talked about the feeling of why people do the London Marathon and the feeling of raising money for different causes, and ultimately about how it makes other people feel proud. And it's an achievement that you can be proud of. And all we did was talk about that. And then we linked it to, so the purpose of today's game is to go out and make yourself and your parents feel proud.
Wow.
Like, we didn't talk in-depth tactics. We didn't talk about the learning that we'd done during the week that we were then going to put into practice, into the game, which sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. We didn't talk about any of that. We got the kids to talk about their proud moments that they had so far, of which a few were football, a few weren't.
That's amazing. Can I ask, when did you decide to do that?
Yeah.
So really, that's it. When did you decide to do that?
The day before in training. So Dell, the coach that I used to work with, who was a fantastic coach, he just cared for the kids. He knew his football stuff, but brilliant with the kids. And we used to have a great relationship that meant we would go, right, this is what we can do, and we'll talk about stuff. So the day before, we knew the fact, obviously it was the London Marathon the following day. So it was the day before. So we didn't really plan too much about what it would look like.
Right. But
we had decided, how do we diffuse the nervousness?
It's really interesting, isn't it? I know in some little pockets over the last 14 episodes, we've talked about, the prep part and the athletes like choosing a certain type of music or death by whiteboard. But like, that's a really key question. Like, how do you have something in the bank and then go in and feel what's happening in the room, if it is, pre-game, pre-training session, to be able to either dilute or diffuse or refocus. And it's a really interesting conversation. I don't know if people spend enough time thinking about, like, what will set the tone and pitch of the session, aside from, me giving information about what's in the session. What are the other important parts to that? It was just made me think there about, like, all the other sports that I've visited. One little journey I took was a 24-hour dash to Glasgow from London. Yeah, one of my many crazy ideas. There was 5 swimming coaches I was working with, and the British champs were on, so we went up. And it was so interesting to observe the prep that each of the coaches, or the priming that each of the coaches had with their athletes. Some let their athletes go and do what they needed to do, because, in swimming, they have that holding area as well. So it isn't a case of, what I had experienced in basketball, like hands in, let's go. And you're on the court, and the proximity is right, really close, and they're able to still communicate if there's any little last bits and pieces, as are the bench and the crowd. So some let their athletes go off and do what they needed. Others sat down and had a piece of paper, and they kind of had some questions on that, or some expectations that they were talking about. So it could be used as a distraction, but also as a focus to review afterwards. Others had this, you can do it, interaction with them. And then similarly, I observed I'm just going to tag it as a debrief, but they'd have a swim down. Some would have the conversation before the swim down. Some would give the athletes space, the swimmers, to do that. So it's really fascinating to look at the varied approach. And I don't know, the situation in as such depth that I could say, that I would say, I wonder, is that right or wrong? But I would ask them how they got to that point. And it was through, along awareness of communication with the athletes. What works for you? How do you like game days? What does our timeline look like? And like you said there with the blended, there's some things that you'll know from being a coach over years.
Intuition.
Football, your intuition's there. You kind of said, this environment can cause this, this, and this for other athletes, for me, for, I don't know, like a physiological reason. So here's some options to explore together. But it was really fascinating to look at that prep stage that contrasted so differently from the invasion experiences I'd had.
I think one of the interesting questions to then start to reflect and consider is, so in that moment of, kids are probably feeling like this, from our experiences of doing it for quite a few years, kids are probably feeling like this, parents are definitely feeling the pressure. If we chose a different method, what would be the likely outcome of it? So that, I think, is a really interesting reflection question to start to explore. So what are the different options? Yeah. Right, well, we could do A, B, C, D, and E, and F, right? Okay. But if we'd have chosen option B, where do we think that would have taken the kids, and why? Yeah. And what would have been the impact on performance? Because ultimately, that's what we're doing, is we are creating something that is going to impact on the performance out on the pitch. That's what we're aiming to do by choosing a particular method at the start, or an approach. But that, I think, is an interesting question. What do you not choose to do? But if you had have chosen that, where do you think it would have taken you?
And another, just a tag onto that, because I think it's an absolutely fantastic question, is a conversation I had with a rowing coach before we went, and I watched, before there was a race, and he thought he'd absolutely nailed the briefing or primer for this particular race. And I said, how do you know? Is it the smiles on the face you're looking at? These are, university age athletes. The conversation is, we're doing this, and this, this, a lot of positivity in it. And I think sometimes it is that deflection from the anxiety that coaches can have, where you're over talking, or you're giving information. The cognitive load is just, kind of, whoa, I'm just really nervous. All I can focus on is what I can hear back over there. There's a whistle going, or the wind is blowing through somewhere, or so I love that question of thinking, what have we been doing for a long time? Even if the athlete said in your conversations, this works for me, what's missing? We can revisit those kind of things. So yeah.
Ultimately, I think, what we're trying to achieve is, by using different strategies in those development years, what we want to be able to do is help athletes and players get to the stage where they know themselves really well, that they know how to get themselves in the best frame of mind for performance.
Yeah.
Now, Stuart Pearce, and I worked with Stuart for many, many years, as an international footballer, never used to warm up. Never used to warm up. He just thought it was a waste of energy, which is kind of where I'm at now in my 40s. Like I have a small amount of energy. I need to retain them. So he literally just used to go into the side room at Wembley in the England games and just smash a ball against the wall, because he wanted, in order to perform his best, to be in a full, like ready to go aggressive state, because that was where he performed his best. And like, ironically, off the pitch, he's nothing like that. He's quite quiet. He has his moments of loudness, but he's definitely not that player personality. And he's a hugely nice guy, but very different to how he performs his best.
Yeah.
And other players probably need the entire opposite. They need to be really relaxed and laid back. You know, they might chill out and listen to music on their own. They might do their own thing.
Yeah.
But ultimately, as coaches, we want to try and give kids lots of different experiences so that they can start to be able to get themselves ready for performance as well.
Oh, massive. Because we know how much the mental part plays on that day of a competition or a game, whatever it is. And I think if you strip it back, like, there's definitely that autonomy. And I remember the first performance foundation group we were only in the door about half an hour. They'd never met each other. And this conversation kicked off, really rich conversation. And the debates were there, well, no, we warm up as a team. Even it's an individual sport, but we warm up as a group, if you like. And we want to, do all our stretches and our activators together. That's what we do. And there was another coach who said, I have some people who come in and sleep under the stands. They come in an hour and a half, they sleep under the stands, get whatever snacks they need, do their loosening up or prep, and they go in. And so there was like, oh, but how this and how that, and who informs that? And, it's really interesting, the style that you use, what informs that, and how comfortable are you as a coach to allow them do that? And who inputs to that, so it's a really interesting topic.
I think one of the big things I think we would probably encourage coaches to consider is certainly in that pre-game bit and at halftime or timeouts, etc. How much information do you think a player can store in their head that's relevant to impact on their performance before they leave and go out to perform? And I've certainly, in my years gone by, just bombarded people with like tactical stuff. And then just reflect and think, well, being in that position as a player, like I probably would have zoned out after maybe 90 seconds.
Yeah.
So how does that impact on coaches? So it's like, right, well, this is three things. The wonderful, 3, it's the magic number. De La Soul, great song. Just give them three things, because they probably can't retain more pieces of information than that.
And in that, 100% on board with you there. The three things, and this is just my personal angle from years of analyzing dressing rooms and obviously looking at the mental side of things as well, that you're not going to be able to I guess what I'm trying to say is that people don't make mistakes on purpose. So coming in and talking, if it is a halftime, say in the basketball world, and you have a little bit longer, like talking about all the mistakes you've made in the first half. Why are you doing that? People are not trying to make the mistakes. If there's a one-to-one where you could go, Nick, if you just quickly change your body that way, or if you lift your head that way, maybe that helps. Maybe some players are able to do that. But I remember dressing rooms with some coaches, we came in, berated us at halftime. Absolutely berated us at halftime. I think a part of them thought, if I motivate them and get them to cop on, let's go, that they'd go, okay, yeah, shake off all the crap and we'll just go out. But really part of it was their embarrassment as well. They were so embarrassed on the sideline with their players representing them. But for me, there was that particular year we played, there was no cues. The triggers weren't relating to the team that was there. It was buzzwords that we hadn't talked about in training. So they didn't relate to what we were saying in the game. So you might say a full court press in basketball, we would say red. And all of a sudden it was blue, or it was a number, and you're kind of going, or get up on them, or like there's a whole array of things you could say, but we're like, but this is what we talked about and this is not happening, or we never heard this before. And now you're saying, expelling all that energy as a coach to get something done. But it's back to the Sabutio coaching, if like moving people around. So I would say 100% on the 3 points, pre, during, after, whenever you discuss them, but to be solution focused when there is a point there, or let them, if they're of age, hopping on the back of the Steve Kerr stuff last week, the football teams I've worked with, we at halftime, starting at the start of the game, have the stuff up, the 3 areas, maybe their key points or the key words that we've mentioned in the last few months, that they come out then in the coach. So if, say, relentless was a word, we would have unpicked relentless into a physical action, and then they would be able to get that. For some, the relentless would work, or savage was another word that the football team used, and one of the guys loved to say it. So they were all like, come on, savage. And everyone was like, close out your man, shift across. And then at halftime, we were able to kind of link the stats to that, but then go forward into something else, solution focused. Well, what's next? And the players were able to answer that. What are you seeing forwards? What are you seeing backs? What are you seeing goalies in their units and coming back and having a chat? And it's really rich. It doesn't always, I can't say that everything worked there, but this particular team we worked with are the most successful team in the country in Gaelic football. So something's working for them,
Yeah, we at kind of national football team level, we used to literally go, right, we're with the players anyway before, because it's a camp, but right, so you work through the game plan. You've done that prep on the pitch, off the pitch. You've got the game plan, so it's not like you're suddenly going to drop it on, as they're getting ready for the game. So they know the stuff before that. Before the game, you might literally have on the big screen in the changing rooms, but in reality, for most coaches, that could literally just be the whiteboard with them. Right, bang, bang, bang. Here's the 3 things that we want you to think about. And that could be an in possession or out possession. You might remind them of set pieces. Off you go play. When they come back in at half time, just focus then on the game plan. Don't try and coach everything, because loads of stuff will have happened that you could coach. And like you said there, we tried never to go into skill errors, but if there were some effort errors, that's a different conversation. But just go back to the game plan, right? Are we achieving what we set out at the start of the game to try and achieve? Yes, no, but again, typically the first kind of 5 or 6 minutes of that halftime period, it was down to the players, because they'd want to come in, they'd want to let off steam of stuff that had gone well, stuff that hadn't gone well, depending on the state of the game. Let them relax. Coaches can chat. Coaches can agree the messages that are going to go to the players. Right, across we go. Here's what we've seen after the players have told us what they've seen. Great, address it to the game plan. Right, go play again second half. Yeah. But otherwise, you can get just bogged down in so much.
Yeah, you can't bog down, absolutely. And as you were talking there, I was thinking to myself, we link into the parents side. People may do this already. So if you have a scenario where you have some parents who are interested in taking part, or they're sideline shouters, if that's the case, asking them to record a couple of bits and pieces. They're so into the game anyway. And, in football, that's probably easier, and some of the invasion sports a little bit easier. But if it's around, for example, if the team I work with, I don't go through layers and layers of bits and pieces, but again, I link to the words that we're looking to, that we've dissected into, if it's a tackle count and it's linked to effort, and it's maybe touches in the ball. So we have a benchmark for the numbers that are there. And this is an amateur sport, but that's important to be able to, and hands up, we know numbers aren't the be all and end all. But if that helps us measure something at halftime that can refocus us and take the emotion out of the conversation, and you have some people who are going to volunteer, a piece of paper and a pen and some notational stuff can really bring people in together, but then inform your coach conversation, let the players, whatever age they are, have a chat about it, and then bringing them together. It's that kind of structure can remove some emotion, and both for management or your coaching group and for the players.
The other part linked to that is, at what stage do you get input from the players or the athletes?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So if we're, I guess from my own experience, because I'm mindful that they're not all team sport people watching and listening, but for our own experience, I think if it's coming through training, then you'll have people who are feeling comfortable to speak in that space. And I know we mentioned before that like sometimes people who don't know how to manage that energy in the break, so if it's at a timeout period or a halftime, that they'll speak because they need to get their energy out and they're frustrated. But I think there's a difference between when you do give them that space and you come in, from my angle and my experience, letting the players feed back, maybe having some key leaders or key communicators who feed back what they've chatted about as a group, never on their own, as a group. And then you come in and kind of go, right, whatever, thanks for your observation, or great point, we could use that. Or even if they're experienced enough, more experienced as a group with you and not necessarily age or level, to then say, well, what do you think is the answer? What can we do? You know, and that's again getting them thinking and refocusing on where they're going back to. If it was something like golf between the holes, and I know again you could be looking at older, like I still think that relationship as they're walking and talking is, you know, so super important. And when do you speak? When do you listen? What kind of cues and language and triggers are you tapping into to get the next setup ready? You know, when you tee off for the next one, or yeah. That's I think is interesting. I don't know if there's I think it should be ongoing is the answer. I don't know if there's one specific point, but if we look at like, you know, even between bouts and that minute that you have, who takes up that time? Or is there need for anything in that time? Is there just need for some breathing, getting yourself composed in a shorter space? We're coming into summer, there may be some water breaks and stuff in different games, but how do you utilize those breaks in play?
I think what we're probably, I guess the takeaway message is think about those moments, how you can use them for the benefit of the players, the athletes, the kids, the adults, whoever it is that you're working with. How can you use them to get some real benefit from a development perspective, a learning perspective, as well as a tactical perspective? And also just consider that there's more options than just you telling, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Got another large chunk of time just flew by there.
Absolutely.
So it's end of season 1. Yeah, I know. And we did talk about some new things that we're going to introduce, but we are going to stay on the thread of like everything that we talk about linked to coaching. How can I develop my coaching? How can I widen my coaching network and broaden it out, and even broaden my views on things? And what does effective questioning look like? All the different angles that just allow you to feel more confident in that role. So I think, you know, we could do a whole summary. We might do that at the start of season 2. But what we'll try and do next season is bring some clips in and have a look. Maybe people would submit their clips and we can have a chat. I saw some, like I get the fortune in my role to see loads of coaches in action, and through COVID, they send them in, even if they're Zoom sessions. So we could have a chat about any sessions that people want to send us in, and we can look at the coaching, listen to what's happening, and share with everybody. So maybe that's something to unpick. But thank you for all following us on Twitter and emails and all your communication at Coach Convos, where we're at on Twitter, and coachconversations@gmail.com. If you have any ideas for season 2 and something that you'd like us to dive into, please let us know. So have a great week, and we will see you next season. Bye.
Bye.